So the winning video idea, as voted on by you guys per usual, for this week's Subscribers Justice video with a whopping 52% of voters, going for this, was players that could be cut / re-signed by the Giants in 2020. Now I will say the more, kind of the side I'm going to be leaning towards in this video would be cutting, but basically everybody on this list also has the potential to be re-signed, which is why I added in that / re-sign there. And I will say, while going over this list, I came up with surprisingly like around 25 to 30 players on the Giants that could realistically be cut. But we know the ways. I mean, if you've watched the channel for a while now, in these types of videos I try to go for the more impactful players. Of course, on any NFL team there's always going to be like maybe 20 guys or so that don't make it onto the next year's roster just because they're filler players. They're there to fill out the roster, to provide depth and whatnot, and some of these guys definitely are in terms of the list that I have, the big list. And let me just go over some of it right now. Guys like Alex Tanney, Colt McCoy, Cooper Rush. I don't really expect all three of them to be back next year. One out of those three definitely going to get cut. You go into the cornerback room, of course, and I guess this is a disclaimer. Of course, I know DeAndre Baker and Aldrick Rosas should be on this list, but I didn't put them on there because I feel like it would have been a cop-out to you guys. And I've talked about DeAndre Baker extensively on the channel, but he's technically not on the list, even though 100% he could be cut by the Giants. But yeah, DeAndre Baker's on there, Grant Haley, Corey Ballantyne. Offensive line wise, you talk about the guy we signed this year in Cam Fleming. You talk about a guy from last year, Chad Slate. I think David Sills, the wide receiver from last year. You can go on and on and on. Austin Johnson, the defensive tackle we signed this year. RJ McIntosh, the defensive tackle we took in the same draft as Saquon. There's quite a bit of players on the team that could be cut that would have some sort of impact, but this list of 5 players specifically were the most impactful ones in my opinion that I thought could be cut by the Giants in 2020. With that being said, let's get right to it. So first player up on the list is Giants running back Wayne Gallman out of Clemson, drafted at round 4, pick 140 I think in 2017. Gallman at the time that he was drafted was going to be the next Giants starting running back in 2017 when the run game was I think one of the worst in the league, which obviously eventually led to us taking Saquon in 2018. But Gallman was somebody that came in and somebody that Giants fans, they kind of had a lot of faith in because he kind of showed out at Clemson a little bit, definitely had a hand to play in winning the college football championship that year with Deshaun Watson, his quarterback. And Gallman showed that he could run somewhat at the NFL level, be a little bit of shifty. He is a smaller back, but for various reasons, one of the most important ones being that he was relegated to a backup in 2018 after Saquon came in, and the fact that the Giants running back room right now has a lot of bodies back there, yet to be determined if it's going to be good quality, but we do have a lot of bodies back there. You talk about Wayne himself, of course, Saquon the man, Eli Penny, who's a fullback but at times have played running back, Javarius Buck Allen, who we got from the Ravens, who last year down the stretch actually played really well and seemed to play better than Wayne Gallman did last year. And of course we brought in Dion Lewis. It's a pretty stacked running back room when you talk about the amount of people that are back there. And Gallman in general just seems to be somebody last year that fell out of favor with the coaching staff and definitely has kind of been, dipping in terms of fan approval. The dude stands at a good 6 feet, 210 pounds, a bit on the lighter side for running backs in 2017. Like I said, he came in, he wasn't immediately the starter, but eventually down the line, I think he did become the starter at one point for the Giants. He played in 13 games, and according to Pro Football Reference, he only started 1. His stats that year was 111 rushes for 476 yards, no touchdowns, but he did have a nice yardage per attempt with 4.3 yards per attempt. Wasn't used too much in the receiving game, but still some good numbers considering that 2017, the offense was absolute trash. He had 48 targets with 34 receptions for 193 yards and a touchdown. And one of the big things that continued to haunt Gallman until now, 3 fumbles. This is something I'm going to continue to bring up because it's probably one of his biggest problems as just a running back in general. Forget trying to crack the starting, spot when you got one of the greatest running backs maybe of all time on your team in Saquon Barkley. The fact that you can't hold on to the football and keep it secure is already going to affect you a lot. In 2018, of course, like I said, he was put in that backup position, which is understandable, where he had 51 rushes, 176 yards, 1 touchdown, averaging even less, a 3.5 yard per attempt average, with 22 targets, 14 receptions for 89 yards, 0 receiving touchdowns, and 2 fumbles. Now, here's the thing. You have 3 fumbles as somebody that's not even a full-time starter, but I will say at one point he was basically the Giants starting running back in 2017. In 2018, you're the backup. And 2018 was the year where Saquon, for the most part, was the workhorse. For you to come in on backup snaps and still have 2 fumbles is incredibly worrying and not something that you want to see on a backup running back. And that continued into 2019, whereas a backup, and I think he started 2 games because Saquon went down. But remember, I talked about Javarius Buck Allen. For the most part, I think that Buck Allen played more than Wayne Gallman did. Either way, Gallman still had less playing time than he did in 2019 and still came up with a fumble. His stats in 2019 were 29 rushing attempts, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. On the receiving side of things, 15 targets, 11 receptions, 102 yards with 1 touchdown, and once again that 1 fumble. This is most likely the reason why last year he kind of fell out of favor with the coaching staff and they elected to go with Eli Penny and Buck Allen down the stretch. Now, he also did get a concussion in Week 5, which obviously affected his playing time, but after the recommended amount of time, he just wasn't seen on the field anymore. And I think it's kind of obvious for why Wayne Gallman is on this list. He's in the stacked running back room in his time in the league, even though he's had limited snaps, understandably so because he's a backup running back. He hasn't seemed to improve at all. If anything, he seems to have gotten worse or stay stagnant, which is worse than just no change at all. And so Wayne Gallman could be somebody that the Giants just cut ties with and get rid of in maybe even sometime this season, by the end of the season, in the stacked running back room where you got guys like Buck Allen who showed out, Eli Penny who's a really good fullback, and Dion Lewis, a veteran that definitely knows how to hold on to the football and is a reliable back there behind Saquon. So that's why Wayne Gallman is on this list. Moving on to the next person, we have the injury magnet on the defensive side of the football, Sam Beale, cornerback for the New York Giants. Coming out of Western Michigan, taken in the 2018 supplemental draft in round 3, Sam Beale was somebody else that Giants fans had faith in, just like Gallman. They thought coming in he could have been something, but Sam Beale more so, there was more faith in him because he was taken in the supplemental draft, where a lot of people thought that if he came out in the regular draft the following year, he could have potentially been a first-round pick type of cornerback, could have been one of the best cornerbacks in the following draft class. But the fact of the matter is, whether it's because of injury or whether it's because there's just someone better than him on the roster, since coming on to the Giants in 2018, once again being touted as somebody that could potentially be a good to great cornerback in the league, Beale has done nothing in the league. In fact, he completely missed his rookie season because of an injury. During, I think it was a training camp session, July 25th, 2018, he suffered a shoulder injury that knocked him out for his entire rookie season, and he was placed on injury reserve just 4 days later. Then in 2019, and I'll tell you right now, at this point, Sam Beale was already forgotten by a lot of fans and a lot of people, for good reason, because of course in the 2019 draft, the Giants, well, they took a lot of cornerbacks. DeAndre Baker, of course, they took Julian Love, they took Corey Ballantyne. They really beefed up that cornerback room at the time. They still had Janoris Jenkins. The secondary was really kind of beefed up in terms of the quantity of players there. The quality still to be figured out to this day. But Beale was already being, thrown to the back of the room simply because of the numbers and because of his injury. So in 2019, September 1st, he was placed on injury reserve with a hamstring injury, and that's even before the season even starts. And he wasn't able to even see the field until mid-season around October. I think he was activated on November 5th of that year, so mid towards the end of the season. And by that point in time, he was not going to start ahead of somebody like DeAndre Baker. Julian Love was being on the field as both a cornerback and a safety. Even Corey Ballantyne was getting some play time as him. And of course, until Janoris Jenkins really got cut, which of course left a hole in the cornerback locker room, that was really where he got his time to shine, so to speak, if you would call it that. Here are the 6'1", 177-pound 23-year-old. He's still young, which is kind of sad to think about. Here was his stats for 2019, and in fact, 2019 once again being the only year that he even got to touch an NFL field. He played in just 6 games. He started 3, and he had only 1 pass defended. He had 26 total tackles, 20 solo tackles, 6 assisted tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and 1 safety. Now, of course, those are pretty sparse stats, especially when you consider that he only, started 3 games and he wasn't really targeted that much. I mean, when he was targeted, I think he had 21 targets. He allowed 16 completions for a just terrible 76.2% completion percentage. Had 171 yards on his head and a touchdown. And just all around, not exactly the player he was meant to be, I guess you could say, considering the hype. And considering how he did perform in college, the hype didn't just manifest out of nowhere. It's not like the guy is an extreme athletic freak or a freak of nature or a creative Madden player. You saw how tall he was, his weight. He is kind of on the smaller side with the weight. His snap count, I think he only played 9% of the defensive snaps. It's just not a good outlook for Sam Beale. I will say, though, towards the end of the season when he did start those 3 games, and of course, DeAndre Baker was kind of thrust into the situation of being the number 1 corner, and Sam Beale at times was either being the number 3 or number 2. His performance, just kind of the eye test on the field, was not that much different from Baker in my opinion. But that's just me, a casual fan looking at football on the field. For example, Pro Football Reference is over here saying something else. And the guy certainly has a chance now to prove himself and maybe be re-signed by the Giants, solidify a roster spot, considering the Baker situation and the fact that somebody's going to need to step up in there. But I don't know if he's going to do it. He's definitely a potential candidate, a really big potential candidate for just being cut by the Giants. You consider how he's performed, you consider the injuries, and you consider the fact that there's a lot of bodies back there. Coming up next on the list is somebody that I honestly had no problem putting on this list, but for some reasons, Giants fans, and I will say this, I was guilty of this last year, not so much this year. For some reason, we seem to overhype him a little bit and have too much faith. Corey Coleman, the wide receiver for the New York Giants, the high injury risk wide receiver for the New York Giants. I don't use the word injury prone anymore. Go check out my last episode of the Fantastic Giants podcast where I had an actual doctor of physical therapy as a guest. We talked a lot of medical stuff, specifically pertaining to Evan Ingram and Giants and injuries. Shameless plug, go check it out. There was a lot of medical knowledge in that episode. You guys are gonna love it. Shameless plug. But Corey Coleman, a high injury risk player, wide receiver for the New York Giants, mostly wide receiver depth. Somebody, and before I get into my actual script here, I'm gonna go off the top right now. I'm just kind of gonna go off the dome and tell you why, without looking at my script, I just know Corey Coleman is not gonna make it past this season with the Giants. Like I said before, I think the dude's probably gonna get injured again. That's the first one. Number 2, people often bring up the fact that he had a good success rate with Eli. That was completely overhyped. The guy in 2018 when he played with Eli, I think he had like 1 good game, and his stats were like, now I am going to pull up Pro Football Reference. That's because I don't have his stats memorized. He had just 5 receptions for 71 yards his entire season in 2018. He just so happened to look like he had good connection with Eli. But even then, that would be disregarded because Eli's not the quarterback anymore as Daniel Jones. And in 2018, completely different offense. In fact, it was a different, offense and coaching from even 2019 when the same staff was there. I think we can all agree that it all just declined after 2018. Pat Shurmur just seemed to lost his stuff, and the offense didn't even look the same in 2019 than it did in 2018. So that's your third reason there. Reason number 4 is that I completely believe he was brought back on the team, and the first reason to be a special teamer, to be a kick/punt returner. But even then, last year without him, the Giants were, they were pretty good on special teams. They were definitely above average, and it was definitely a strong point of the team, with a guy like Cody Core who took over that job for Corey Coleman. And now I'm kind of thinking, well, do we even need him on special teams anymore? So those are 4 reasons just off the top of my head, off the dome, that Coleman could be cut right there. And it's like, I'm laughing because part of me wants to just end the Coleman section of the video right there, but that would make me seem heartless and mean and kind of like I hate Corey Coleman, which is the exact opposite of the situation. I love Corey Coleman. I love his potential, which we'll get into a little bit later on in this section. And like I said, last year I was one of his top believers. I mean, last year, man, it's even on the channel. That was like when I was only a month into YouTube or something like that. But last year with Coleman, I really thought he was about to come out and break out and be our number 3 receiver. I was like, for sure, Coleman's going to have the best career of his season. He's going to have like 600-700 yards receiving. It's going to be great. And then like that month before the season, I know you guys are going to recognize what I'm talking about, where all of our hearts were broken, where like the entire wide receiving core just went down, man. Golden Tate got suspended. Darius Slayton got injured. Sterling Shepard got injured. Corey Coleman got injured, knocked out for the entire season. Like everybody in the wide receiving core went down, and everything just went downhill, man. I was like, wow, damn, that really just happened. Like I said, I was one of this dude's biggest supporters, but the fact of the matter is, as much as we need help with wide receiver depth right now, which is probably the main argument for why Coleman might not get cut, is the fact that we're so desperate for depth, is that we can't just take any depth. We need quality depth. We can't have... The depth is there for when your starters can't make the game. And if your starters can't make the game and then the person you got as the backup can't make the game either, what's the point in having them there? I guess that's the argument I'm trying to make. And Coleman has just been injured way too much in his career thus far, and it is a young career. And even when he's in there, he's only had flashes of being good, you know, flashes of being better than good. He's never had consistency to his game, and I'm sure I've already at this point thrown up his previous stats, the ones from 2018. He's just not been healthy enough and consistent enough on the field to justify him still being on the Giants, other than the fact that they're really desperate for wide receiver depth. Now, that being said, his potential is off the charts as an outside speedy receiver. Darius Slayton is really a better version, healthier version of Corey Coleman if you want to get down into the more simple, like the simplest of terms that you could get down into. And if Coleman can stay healthy, for sure he's going to stay on the team, and he'll probably be a great weapon, especially in the Garrett offense, which would love to have another speedy receiver to use other than just Darius Slayton. But it's all a big what if, you know? And maybe by the end of the 2020 season, he stayed healthy enough and he was on the field long enough, or he had such a big impact on special teams that he got his job back from Cody Core, that they keep him on. Because when he was in there in special teams, I'll tell you right now, he was definitely probably the best punt and kick returner in the league in 2018. But I don't know, it's just I don't see it happening realistically as much as I would want it to, and that's why he ends up on the list here. So coming in next on the list is somebody that I probably, you know, I'm still debating. Well, I'm not anymore because he's here. BJ Hill. BJ Hill, the defensive tackle for the New York Giants. Somebody that I thought about putting at the top of the list. But I kind of put him back down to number 2 because he has as much chance of being cut, as much chance as being re-signed / extended, and as much chance as being traded, you know, all at the same equal level, more than anybody else on the team right now. The 25-year-old taken out of North Carolina State in round 3, pick 69, nice by the Giants in 2018. He came out and he had a great rookie year, and I will say this, at the time he was drafted, there were a lot of people saying that Bradley Chubb got that entire North Carolina State, NC State defensive line drafted because, of course, Bradley Chubb was one of the best players coming out of that draft and certainly the best edge rusher, the best defensive player coming out of the 2018 draft. And so there is reason to say that by his performance, his teammates also benefited. And it was an argument that BJ Hill seemed to completely disprove in his rookie year, as he broke and now holds the Giants rookie sack record with 5.5 sacks in your rookie season. And BJ Hill, by all accounts, seemed to be, you know, a first or even, you know, second or first round type of pick player, because he definitely outperformed his 3rd round selection. He ended up finishing his rookie season with 48 total tackles, 32 solo, 16 assisted, with, of course, the 5.5 sacks, and even 2 safeties, just making an eruption with almost every game he was in, at least tackle-wise. Now, where it comes down to with the sacks, and this is probably where maybe the 2019 coaching staff, for all the flack that I give the 2019 coaching staff, because it is a step down from what they were in 2018. Nobody knows how or why, but they just were not the same, did not perform at the same level they did, and they certainly decreased. And I think that does play a factor into BJ Hill's performance for last year. And in fact, let me just tell you his stats for 2019. He finished with 32 total tackles, 15 solo, 21 assisted, 2 tackles for loss, and just 1 sack. Although I will say, keep in mind, definitely a decrease because he did see a lot less time on field, a lot less playing time in 2019 because of the fact that we got Leonard Williams in a trade, and Leonard Williams essentially replaced BJ Hill as a starter on that defensive line. Now, kind of getting back to that point with the coaching staff, despite the fact that they decreased, and I think that played into a little bit, it's not exactly out of the question that players can have sophomore slumps. I'll definitely say that BJ Hill had a sophomore slump. You combine that with less playing time, you combine that with the fact that he was essentially replaced, and it doesn't exactly spell success for somebody that holds a rookie sack record. And I will say, if you do take away his Chicago game in 2018, he has only 2.5 sacks on the season. That Chicago game, he did go crazy, but the entire Giants roster did, it seemed like, on both sides of the ball. He had 3 sacks that game, and BJ Hill definitely made his name known. And this was, of course, after the Snacks Harrison trade. So it did seem like he benefited from getting even more playing time after Snacks left, and Hill kind of got a more solidified role in the roster. Now, the reason they even brought Leonard Williams over is because he wasn't performing up to snuff in 2019 in the first place. Like I said, a sophomore slump, but that's normal. So the question with BJ Hill, right, it's really a question of, did he suffer from just poor coaching decisions, both in the fact that they don't recognize that the guy is going through something very normal for an NFL player, and the fact that they kind of even hindered that more by bringing someone else in. Then, you know, we have the whole Leonard Williams fiasco now. Or was he just somebody that had, with that Chicago game, a great game, that one great game, and it boosted everything else about his game? Because like I said, he wasn't performing up to stuff in terms of pass rush or run stuffing for the first half of the season. Definitely showed a decrease from last year. But Hill, because of all that I just said, because of the uncertainty, because of the fact that the defensive line is the strongest part of the Giants team, with him on it and without him on it, with Leonard Williams on it, the defensive line, honestly, if Hill is gone, wouldn't suffer that much. RJ McIntosh right behind him could probably step up. He's probably, like I said, he has equal chances of being cut, equal chances of being re-signed depending on what happens with Williams, and equal chances of being traded. But Hill is definitely somebody on that bubble. I would love to see him make sort of a comeback, so to speak, and build upon that amazing rookie year he had. Love to see him have more games like he did in Chicago, obviously. But BJ Hill is somebody to keep in mind 2020 season, see where he goes, and he will be affected. And it's probably going to be the answer we're going to get. It's going to be shown in the amount of playing time that he gets this season. Now, coming on at top of the list, the top spot, somebody that I thought about not putting in because I thought it would have been a cop-out, Nate Solder, the current Giants left tackle, and one of the highest paid players at his position. Nate Solder, guy we got into 2018 free agency. And like I said, I thought this might have been sort of a cop-out answer because, like I said, I didn't include DeAndre Baker or Aldrick Rosas. Those guys were kind of obvious. But Nate Solder, another person that's kind of been slipping the Giants fans' minds a little bit in the recent months with everything that's been going on. But also definitely out of anybody on this list and out of anybody that could be cut from the Giants, you know, of course, besides the locks like Daniel Jones and, you know, the lock like Saquon Barkley and all that, besides those guys, if Nate Solder is cut, he has the biggest impact on the team because he plays one of the most important positions on the team. And I don't even need to go in on Nate Solder as I did with other players on the list like Sam Beale, Corey Coleman, and even BJ Hill. I think we all know the story on Nate Solder. The guy signed in 2018 by the Giants, definitely overpaid. At the time, people thought he was overpaid, but it wasn't really clear how much he was really getting until the season began and Nate Solder really got on the field, and we saw just how bad he was considering what he was being paid. Now in 2018, Solder, he had that Jekyll and Hyde season. The first half was terrible. The second half was actually pretty good, and he improved more and more as the season went down the line. And so that led to the belief that maybe, just maybe, the guy needed some time to adjust to a completely new system coming over from New England, which we all know Belichick and his magic ways don't exactly, usually his players don't have success outside of New England. So he probably maybe took some time to adjust to it and whatnot. He took some time to adjust to Eli, to adjust to Saquon. And then in 2019, I will say, 2019 by far his worst career year. He gave up 12.5 sacks, which was a career high, and in general, the tackle duo the Giants had in 2019 was ranked the worst in the league in terms of QB hurries, pressures, and sacks allowed. But there are factors that play into it. That Solder was coming off of a surgery, he was recovering from that. He had personal issues going on. One of his children, they were recovering from cancer and whatnot. The guy had a lot going on in his life. Doesn't fully excuse the performance on the field. We already talked about extensively the coaching decline in 2019 that also definitely played into his play decline. You talk about age, a rookie quarterback back there, you know, an inexperienced signal caller that Daniel Jones, honestly, one of the biggest knocks on him is the dude just doesn't recognize pressure. There's a lot to play into that, but it's still not enough to justify his terrible performance as one of the worst, if not the worst left tackles in the league, considering what he's being paid. And then you talk about the amount that the Giants invested just this offseason in terms of repairing that offensive line, taking one of the best, no, you know what, the best offensive tackle and left tackle in the draft this year in Andrew Thomas, taking one of the best project players in Matt Peart to possibly be the future right tackle, signing Cam Fleming to what in my opinion was the nail in the coffin. You're signing a veteran swing tackle that has had success on both the Patriots and the Cowboys, two of the more successful offensive lines in the league. That was the nail in the coffin for me. We're going to replace a veteran in Nate Solder with a way cheaper veteran in Cam Fleming that's honestly probably going to perform the same as Solder did these past 2 years. And then, of course, the new offensive line coach in Mark Colombo. The Giants just put so much towards that O-line this offseason that all signs point towards Solder just not being on the team for another year. So he's going to be released very soon. And, you know, there's not really, I don't think there's any chance of him being re-signed. Maybe there's going to be a contract restructuring, but then there's the whole new, with the NFL CBA, the guy could be cut and you could split the cap hit over 2 years, which is even more reason for the Giants to get rid of him. Nate Solder just 100% is the player with the most, I don't know how to say it, the most likely player, the most probable player to be cut on the Giants here, and there's not really much else to say about it. But that's my list for y'all. Video's already long enough. Let me know what you all think. Put your comments down below, and I'm out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I'll catch y'all in the next one.